So welcome this evening. I just threw this up here for the first slide so we can talk about some differences and just start to look at some egg masses, because tonight we're going to be talking about vernal pools in Maine. And these are two different egg masses of two different species, two of our indicator species of vernal pools. So go ahead and use the chat box at the bottom of your screen if you're interested to type in observations, or go ahead and unmute yourself and just share different things that you see. So I definitely see a little seed in this one on the left, which I know is not an egg.
I see just two different types of egg masses, and I know what they are.
Well, that's
It's like
not fair.
I know it's not fair. So one mass has the eggs in like their own little orb, their little jelly pack. Feel like there's a bunch of them and they're stuck together.
Right, we can see that on the left.
Yeah. And then the other one, it looks like the eggs have their own little packet, but then they're surrounded by this jelly coating.
Great.
It looks like there's triplets there too.
Yeah, this one on the front, it does. I hadn't even noticed that. Does anybody else have any other observations they want to share?
I was looking at a section of a clementine orange today, and they have very similar little pockets that are outlined with a some type of membrane, and so it looks very. This reminds me of it very much.
The one on the left, Irene?
Actually, the one on the right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Don't eat these ones though.
No.
Although lots of other animals do. So.
That's true.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to just keep on going. So
but I mean, excuse me, but there must be some reason why nature has made these little pockets, and they're not uniform, but they're very discreet. And is there a reason why they're not just all in one mass? Just like the clementine, all the juice isn't in one pocket, you know, it's in many little ones.
Yeah, I mean, nature has a reason for everything it does, right? Yeah, that's the way that it has evolved and adapted to the things. And so I would say that in the orange and clementine, probably it's in those protected in the little pulp packets to keep it from drying out, so the juice stays in its own little envelope. And similar, the juice stays in these little eggs and helps to help the embryos mature and not dry out if the vernal pool dries out too soon.
Maybe it's to reduce the risk. If one area dries out, there's still other little pods that can.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, absolutely. Nice. All right, folks, welcome. I'm Alana from the Lakes Environmental Association, and we have Mary here as well, our other educator. Actually, I'm probably the other educator. I came second, so I'm the other. And we get to talk tonight about vernal pools, which is something very near and dear to our hearts. So first I'll do a little introduction. Then we will talk about what makes a vernal pool and not something else. Talk about who needs vernal pools, and we'll meet the fabulous indicator species, the stars of the pools. And then vernal pool conservation. Oops, I didn't put any federal stuff in there, so ignore that, sorry. And then resources at the end. This is a pool in Raymond at the Raymond Community Forest. That's a preserve of Loon Echo Land Trust. So to start us off, here I am at that same pool last year with Hadley. She took the picture for me, and then you might recognize this egg mass in the center here, but I just wanted to talk about LEA for a moment. Our mission is to preserve and restore the exceptional water quality of Maine's lakes, ponds, rivers, streams, and wetlands, and the integrity of their watersheds. So it's really whole watershed thinking. And guess what? That includes vernal pools, which is pretty exciting. So part of why I get to talk about it tonight and share this information with you. We are a member-based organization, and so if you're not a member, please consider becoming a member and supporting our work. So what makes a vernal pool? So there's several big factors. We're going to talk about hydrology in a second, and then all these other ones as well, but I wanted to show you my fancy PowerPoint skills here. So we have a fish here, but in vernal pools, there are no fish. There are these other indicator species. On the left here is the wood frog, and you'll notice them with their beautiful little robber's mask, and they lay these eggs below. This is actually Mary's nephew's hands holding a little wood frog egg mass of a pool we looked at in Lovell last year. And then on the right here, we have the yellow spotted salamander, which is another indicator species in Maine. And this egg mass up above is from a yellow spotted salamander. So we can tell these apart because, as we sort of noticed in the beginning slide, the wood frog egg masses have these separate little eggs that you see. And it's really loose and jelly-like, almost like a jelly that you left out, so it's softer. And then the salamander egg mass, the yellow spotted salamander, has those individual eggs on the inside, but then it has this beautiful thick membrane around the whole thing. And typically they are kidney shaped, the spotted salamander egg masses, and they're really firm. Like I was thinking I make jelly, and earlier I was thinking about how to describe this, and I was like if you add too much pectin to the jelly, it becomes very thick. So that's how the salamander egg mass is for me. So finally, another thing that makes a vernal pool is isolation. There's no inlet or outlet for these. There may be at high water. They may actually be created by water going over a riverbank and into a depression. And so initially there might be some fish in there, but through the season it draws down and there's no more fish. So isolation for these pools, they're not physically connected by an inlet or an outlet to another body of water. Okay, so hydrology. And the hydro period, we can think about the duration of the water in the pool. So generally it's temporary to semi-permanent. I have a pool behind my house that has water in it all year long, which is pretty exciting. But a lot of vernal pool species are used to not having that water in there come fall, and they are adapted and designed really to be able to lay their eggs. Those eggs mature. Oh, sorry. And then those frogs or salamanders crawl out before the pool dries up, hopefully. So like I said, no permanent inlet or outlet. And the water sources for vernal pools are rain, snow melt, and groundwater. So essentially these are like wicked big puddles in the woods. And vernal means spring, and they receive most of their water in the springtime, but people also call them seasonal forest pools because some of them fill up in the fall, which are important for some vernal pool species as well. So water levels in vernal pools fluctuate daily, weekly, on a yearly basis. They're different all the time. There might be dry years that some pools will not hold water into the fall long enough for the amphibians to develop fully. And some years they will hold it all year. And vernal pool species, like I mentioned, they have adaptations to survive this. Yellow spotted salamanders have a really long life compared to other amphibians. They can live up to 30 years, which is kind of a huge for such a small animal. And part of their survival strategy is that longevity. So they have multiple reproductive opportunities through that life cycle. Okay, so I have 3 pictures here, and I'm sorry about the quality. I think that these were, when we had film and we had to develop those pictures, and so these were scanned in and then put in, but I think it's just such an amazing example. So here's one pool. This is obviously wintertime. here's the same pool with that beautiful log across in the springtime. And then here it is in the summer. So we can really see like there's vegetation growing up in there, and the pool is completely dried out. So as far as like thinking about development or timber harvesting, or even just a walk in the woods, if we're walking around at this time of year in the fall, we may not even notice that there's a pool or a potential pool site. And so development in the fall, particularly, you could clear land and develop right over a space that was a pool and never even know it, which is a little terrifying to me, but I digress. So now we'll just look at a few different vernal pool types. This is on Dugway Road in Bridgeton. Mary and I have done lots of field trips here. And then this is also the site of, if anyone has ever joined Mary for the Big Night crossing, this is the site that they go to on Dugway Road. And this is a great example of how when we put a some sort of development in this case a road, it can change the hydrology underneath. So either this separated some sort of a depression, there's a larger wetland complex across the street here. So maybe this separated this space or held water in a different way than before the road was there. But this pool was created essentially because the road was put in. Yeah, I love to think about how water flows underground, similar to how it flows over the ground, right? I didn't ever really think about that before I came to LEA, but there's a whole groundwater hydrology craziness going on under there. So yeah, here's another pool in Bridgeton. This one's part of a conservation easement, so it's protected, which is great. And you can see these green masses. These are actually egg masses in the center of this pool. This is a classic pool that's fed by rainwater and snowmelt. There's no inlets or outlets in here. Here's another pool. This is a large and very biologically significant pool in Wayne, Maine, also protected by a conservation easement, but you can see the beautiful trees around it. It looks very tranquil, and I probably don't want to go visit during like peak mosquito season. Here's a large wetland also in Bridgeton. And this, although there's pockets in this wetland that do have large populations of spotted salamander and wood frog, this wetland is part of a larger complex which has permanent inlets and outlets, and there's sections of this space that do have fish in it. So this is, although it has wood frogs and salamanders, which are vernal pool indicator species, we know that this is not a vernal pool because of the inlets and outlets there. So then that brings us to sort of a man-made pool, right? This is just a ditch culvert space. And these can actually act as amphibian sinks. We have on our road to the boat launch out at Holt Pond, there is a large, very large rut. It's almost becoming wet all year there, and amphibians will repeatedly and routinely lay eggs in it. So like say that a salamander is trying to get to a bigger pool that it goes to year after year. They have extreme site fidelity, so they're returning to their natal pool year after year. And on their way, they come across this new road and scrape their little bellies across this gravel and then plop into this pool. And they're like, oh, this is closer than I remember. All right, that's fine. And they lay their eggs here. So potentially this dries up earlier and those eggs do not mature into animals that can crawl back out. And so that population or those egg masses potentially would not survive, right? So this can start to be a place where viable populations start to get run down. Let's see. I like to say here too that animals don't read our guidebooks, right? They're not like, oh, this isn't a vernal pool, I shouldn't lay my eggs here. They're gonna lay where it is easiest and makes sense to them at their little amphibian level, right? Okay, so as we mentioned, there's no no fish in vernal pools, and this is pretty important because unlike amphibians, like the bullfrog or the green frog, which have defenses in their eggs and their tadpoles against fish, like they just make them just not tasty enough to keep the fish away. So these guys have those defenses and can be in ponds and lakes and things. Our vernal pool species do not have those defenses, and so it's really important that they have these spaces that do not have fish in them. And I hope earlier that I said, feel free to drop a note or a question in the chat. You're also welcome to just unmute and ask. This is such a small group, so if anything comes up, please just shout it out. Okay, so here are our indicator species, and we talked about the wood frog with that beautiful mask already. Sorry about my dogs. And the yellow spotted salamander, which is just, I don't know, such a fabulous creature. And then down here on the left, we have the blue spotted salamander. And then down here on the right, we have fairy shrimp. So these top three are amphibians. And this bottom right one is a crustacean. It's kind of like a freshwater sea monkey. And we'll talk about them a little bit later, but they're totally fascinating. So these are the species that we're really looking for when we go to assess a vernal pool. And probably we will not actually see the amphibians, probably we'll see their eggs that they left behind. Okay, so here, wood frogs. Wood frogs are going to get to the pool first. They are movers and shakers. They're going to go as soon as like we have the first rainstorm above 40 degrees. They are moving to the pool, and these guys are aggressive and explosive breeders. So it's important that the first, they're trying really hard to get first to the pool because they will lay. I just tried to point to my screen to show you. They will lay in the center and attach their eggs to vegetation. And the egg masses are 50 to 150 eggs each. So let's say the first wood frog gets there and lays their egg. Then the second wood frog gets there and lays a raft right next to the first one. And then the third and fourth and 50th and 60th. And so if you're to the pool last, you're laying your eggs on the outside of this huge mat, which means that you are more likely to be eaten, more like predators can get to you more easily. And then the center of this mat also gets warmed up a little bit, and so the eggs in the middle will mature faster, which is advantageous, right? They're trying to mature and be little tadpoles and be little froglets and get out of the pool. So they will move as soon as they can. You'll hear their croaking, kind of like duck quacking, frog calls. It's like a bass note underneath the peeper call. So wood frogs. And then on the left here, this is my little collection frisbee that I always take out, but I managed to get to the Dugway pool that I talked about earlier, just as they were hatching, which is pretty cool. So the egg masses get looser and looser and looser, and then the tadpoles just come out, and they will actually eat that jelly and algae in the egg mass for energy as well. But I thought this is so cool. You're swimming right out of the egg mass there. Okay, on to the salamanders. So our yellow spotted salamanders are, like I mentioned earlier, they're living longer and they're patient. They're like, it's really not a perfect night. I don't feel like moving yet. So they are usually a couple weeks later than the wood frogs. This year has been so weird, I think. Mary might have more to add to that. But we had a rainstorm, like our first one was still when it was snow. There was snow on the ground was frozen. No amphibians really moved. And then it got really hot and really dry. And we've had a couple little rain events. I saw wood frogs move, a small amount. I haven't seen salamanders yet, but I haven't checked. They may have moved this week and they may have moved last night, which would be pretty exciting. So salamanders, typically the males will get to the pool first, and they lay these little, they're called spermatophores. So they're like pyramids of mucus with a sperm packet on top. So they leave these lovely little presents for the female salamanders who arrive at the pool, and then they'll sort of absorb these spermatophores into their cloaca and fertilize the eggs. And then they, behind here, these are all salamander egg masses. So you can see they are different in shape, they're different in size, and they're different in color. They can be white, like opaque, they can be clear, and they can be green, which I'll talk about in just a second too. So the salamanders, I forgot to mention, they're just more susceptible to drying out and temperature changes. And so that's part of why they will wait for super favorable conditions. And their egg masses are 10 to 100 eggs, kidney shaped, I think I said already. And I learned today that they can actually be out of the water for up to a couple weeks, and that super thick membrane that I was talking about on the outside keeps them from drying out. So sometimes the stick that they lay their eggs on, as the pool dries, the stick becomes, it emerges. It's stuck on the stick, all the eggs. And I have to say, I will break a stick so the egg mass can go in. I've seen Mary do this. I don't know if that's okay or not, but I still do it. They can be along the bottom of the pool, like it's not going to hurt the eggs to be back in the pool, but I just thought it was really cool. They can be out of the water for a little bit of time and the eggs will still be okay. Of course, if it's too long, then they're food for somebody else, right? Which is okay too. Okay, so another thing that's neat about the salamanders is that we always think about pools and spring and everything because we hear the frogs, we hear the peepers and we hear the wood frogs, and we don't hear the salamanders. So I had somebody say once, wood frogs sing and salamanders dance. And so these guys will get into the pool and swirl around each other and move and dance, which I think is pretty cool. Okay. Oh, here we go. This is some underwater footage at that Raymond pool from last year, and you can just see the different, these are all salamander eggs again. Oh, I want to pause it. So super opaque. And then right here is a beautiful caddisfly. So this is one of our pool macroinvertebrates, just a aquatic insect, but there's different types, and this one in particular builds a case out of the leaf material at the bottom of the pool to protect its body. And they will eat the algae off of the eggs and sometimes the eggs themselves. But I thought that was a great shot of the caddisfly. You can see lots of other little critters swimming about. And this pool is so neat because there's like ferns and stuff in it, which shows us that it dries out totally in this fall. It also has like a little inlet that is coming from a spring-fed space, and which also dries up pretty good. Uh-oh, is that the same one?
Looks like the same.
How do I go to my next one?
I had this experience the other day.
Okay, here we go. Sorry about that. There always has to be like some weird technology thing. So this I'm so in love with. So salamander eggs and a type of green algae have this symbiotic relationship. And this algae is only found in yellow spotted salamander eggs. So it's called Ophelia or Oophilia amblystomatis. I just totally wrecked that. I practiced earlier and everything. Sorry. So it means in Latin, salamander egg lover. Oh my God. And then, so the green in this egg mass is that algae, and that algae provides the salamander embryos with oxygen, which helps them to mature more quickly. And then the algae uses the nitrogen and carbon dioxide from the salamander embryos and uses it to grow. It's just like so cool. Anyways,
I'm with you. I'm with you with your excitement right now.
oh my
It's
God,
really neat.
like my heart's beating faster. Okay. So this is like a rabbit hole, this blue spotted salamander. So first I want to say these guys lay eggs singly or like up to 10, and you can see it's super drippy jelly. So very, very different than the yellow spotted salamander. And then there's great variation in these because like you can see how different these two look. And sorry, the one on the left is blurry, but there is a blue spotted salamander hybrid, and they are unisexual. So they're almost entirely female. They, this is like way back when, but they had to mate with other taxa, the Jefferson salamander, the blue spotted salamander, the tiger salamander, the stream side, and the smallmouth salamander. They often produce clones. They contain genomes of other species, and they're usually polyploid, which means, you know, we're diploid, so we take a chromosome set from a parent, a chromosome set from another parent, and now we have both sets. I have to cough, excuse me. Sorry. So this is crazy, and I have to look at my notes because it blows my mind. Okay. So this ancient hybridization is now 2 extinct species. They crossbred, and then that made the hybrid, okay? So the hybrid offspring can't undergo normal meiosis, which we talked about. Instead, the females pass on all their DNA, including the sex chromosomes, which means the next generation is female also. And they need to steal sperm from another parent species, which used to be these other taxa, the Jefferson, blue spotted, tiger, streamside, smallmouth. So now the only donor that we have in Maine, Mary, are there Jefferson salamanders?
I am not sure. I've never seen one in Maine.
I haven't either. I think they're in like New Hampshire and other New England spaces, but I don't think Maine. So our Maine blue spotted hybrids, oh my gosh. Sorry, I'm trying not to cough again. They really only steal from blue spotted salamanders. So that's the only sperm donor. So most of Maine blue spotted salamanders are actually, they're 2 parts blue spotted and 1 part Jefferson salamander. So they look similar to the blue spotted, and that's part of why this one on the left is all, you know, the spots aren't very clear. This looks more like a Jefferson salamander with some like muted blue spots. The one on the right, very blue spotted. So this like really confuses everything for protection. You know, how do we define the blue spotted hybrid? Is it like, do we protect it as its own species? Do we not worry about it because it's on its way out, just like the other taxa that it came from? Like, don't know. And how is it affecting the blue spotted salamander population? We don't really know. So crazy. All right, so these hybrids, the hybrids ones are laying infertile eggs, and you can typically tell because all the eggs are white on the inside. And so this is an infertile salamander egg mass. There's a separate pool at the Raymond Community Forest that was full of these, which is really interesting. I haven't been back this year to look, but I really need to. Okay, so our final one, indicator species that we'll talk about today, is a fairy shrimp. And you can see This one is actually one from the pool out behind my house. And you can see a little brood pouch in the center. So this is a female and she's carrying eggs. You can see the white forked tail, and then you can see those feathers, which is how they move around. They're not feathers, right? But you can see how small it is. It's in my hands. And the adult stage for the fairy shrimp is 1 to 3 weeks long. So it's very fleeting. They are out pretty much as soon as the snow melts. Like they might already be gone this year. But I would say by mid-May, they're definitely gone. So as the air temperature warms, the pool temperature warms. And then that means the oxygen level decreases in the pool, and predators increase as all those tadpoles and salamanders are hatching. So it's not ideal. The fairy shrimp is not a fabulous swimmer. We can see it's like doo-doo-doo. It just doesn't, it can't escape anything if it tries, something tries to come after it. So not ideal. Predators, yeah. By mid-May, most adults are gone. And then I thought this was pretty cool. So we can see the male has these big claspers to hold the female as they mate, and then the female with the brood pouch. So they lay their eggs, which are called cysts. And then I just thought this was amazing. In any given year, only a portion of the previous year's cysts will hatch. They keep a bank of dormant eggs that can last for decades. So one sediment study in Vermont reported 1,000 cysts per square foot of soil of sediment pulled from the pool, and only 3% hatched during any given flood event. So this is like, they're like banking the eggs for later, which is fabulous. So if the conditions are not great one year, they can just wait until the next year or the next or the next. So I just thought that was super cool. I have not seen fairy shrimp in the pool, I think I said, out behind my house this year. And so I've been kind of like, what is going on? And then I read that and okay, calm down. Nature have it all figured out. Here's another fairy shrimp video. A little closer, you can see the brood pouch in this one. And the next one, hopefully it'll go. Yeah, here we go. So this is me releasing that one, and I just want you to watch how quickly it disappears into the pool. Like if you weren't watching that with your eyes, would you even notice that forked tail in the water? I don't know. I've had to train my eyes to see it, but I just think they're pretty amazing. And in Maine, we have 2 types of fairy shrimp. There's a long-lipped one, and then this one. And the longer lipped one is more northern Maine areas, and not really, I don't think it's in other states. Okay, so besides all those fabulous indicator species that we talked about, there's other rare species that use these pools. So we have the Blanding's turtle with this beautiful yellow throat. We have the ribbon snake, the spotted turtle on the right, the ringed bog haunter dragonfly, which, what a cool freaking name. Like I want to be a ringed bog haunter. And then in the pools that are near other rivers and streams, wood turtles will also use the vernal pools. And then we also have a couple of rare plants that so far have just been found in vernal pools. So this is a feather foil. And then we also have a sedge called Tuckerman sedge that's in vernal pools. So I'll talk about assessments in a little bit, but these guys finding evidence of these species in a pool can help us determine significance and protect it, because these guys are all either state listed, threatened, endangered, not found other places. So pretty cool. And then if we think about pools in the greater sense, like who else is using it? And yes, this mink is not in a vernal pool. He has a fish. It's okay. I just pulled a picture off the internet. But all sorts of mammals are using the pools. And waterfowl and different wildlife. They use it to come rest, rejuvenate, get water, and then they're also eating eggs, tadpoles, froglets, little salamanders. These are like really either not moving at all or very slowly moving, and you really don't have to chew much. Like if you're a bear eating a bunch of eggs, waking up after being dormant for the winter, like that's a pretty easy meal. Super highly nutritious. So lots of animals in the greater landscape are using the pools as well. Okay, so I'm just going to read off these slides, but vernal pools need special protection. We already talked about how they're special breeding habitat for these indicator species. They're rare species habitat. Like I said, the vernal pool species in the Northeast are state listed. They are wetland stepping stones in upper landscape, so a forested landscape. And these guys move from 200 feet up to 1,000 feet away from the pool, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But if we keep the pools and get rid of the upland habitat, they can't survive. So we need to sort of maintain these stepping stones throughout the landscape for these biologically significant species. Biological linkages to surrounding uplands. So this, I think, is incredible. Significant amount of amphibian and invertebrate biomass, which is food for other wildlife we talked about. So this researcher in 1990 found the collective biomass of the amphibians. So all the weight of the amphibians in the pool that he was studying was greater than the biomass of all the breeding birds and all the small mammals combined in the 50-acre upland forest surrounding his study pool in Massachusetts. So this is just a crazy amount of biomass, food that's leaving the pool. So the leaves fall into the pool, the algae and the bacteria and the small macroinvertebrates break those leaves down. The tadpoles and salamander larvae eat those things and grow, and then basically hop out, spreading those nutrients around the upland forest. So the critical role in forest nutrient cycling. And then I thought this was interesting, regulating soil invertebrates. So as adults, salamanders and wood frogs are eating those invertebrates in the soil. Okay, so I started to talk about the forest, but amphibians are only at the pool about 2 weeks out of the year. They come out from the upland forest and hop or move their way down to the pool, breed, and immediately go back into the forest. That's where they hang out. That's where they're safest. The salamanders, I failed to mention, are in the mole salamander family, which basically means they're like moles and hang out underground most of their life. They want to be underground, under leaves, in the soil, in the ground, where they can maintain that cool and moist skin layer. So back up to that first bullet. We used to think about like a buffer zone around the vernal pool and saving that for these species, but this other scientist was like, this is really a life zone. Like without this, they cannot live. So let's think about this space as a life zone, not a buffer zone. Okay, so that life zone should also have areas of uncompacted, deep leaf litter, so those salamanders can get underneath, coarse woody material to hide under, and then canopy shade and the forest floor habitat. So that's all vital and necessary. I have a side story about this vernal pool behind my house that I keep talking about. It's not on my land, but it's walkable. And they harvested a couple years ago there, probably 7 years ago now, and they left like a single row of trees just around the pool. And I was like, lost my mind a little bit. And so far things are looking pretty okay. That's a pool that doesn't dry up, but this year, like I said, I have not seen salamanders there yet, which might just be because of the weather that we've had. And I've seen significantly fewer wood frogs so far, or egg masses, which also might be due to the weather. So I have my fingers crossed that everything's okay and stuff's starting to grow back up there. So this is also interesting. Wood frog larvae compared to other frog larvae are better adapted to the canopy conditions surrounding a vernal pool. So they actually really, they can mature in that cooler space, whereas a green frog or a bullfrog or something really like the sunny openness of a pond or a lake. So like I mentioned earlier, the salamanders are moving between 400 and 800 feet away from the pool into the upland forest, and wood frogs up to 3/4 of a mile from the natal pool. So they're really moving and shaking up into the forested landscape. So you'll see in a second, we're protecting a certain amount around the pool, but really those amphibians could be traveling much farther. And then this last point I just find so fascinating because I've seen it in the different pools I've gone to, but wasn't able to connect it to anything. So the macroinvertebrate, those aquatic insects like the caddisfly I showed earlier, so they're noticing significant differences in the aquatic insect or the macroinvertebrate communities, depending on the forest age class and type that's surrounding the pool, which I think is neat and also makes sense. Like if it's a bunch of deciduous trees, all those leaves are falling into the pool, it's going to support certain insects. If it is conifers and deciduous, that's going to support different insects. If it's a young forest compared to an older growth forest, there's different shade, there's different, things going on. So I was like, oh yeah, that makes total sense. Perfect. Okay, so how do we make sure a pool is protected from development? And significant vernal pools have a level of protection in Maine. Unfortunately, other pools don't really have anything in place. And the significant criteria was developed in a way that about 50% of the pools would be found significant and be protected. We do, development is okay and it needs to happen for us. We can do it in a way that is also respecting the other wildlife and biodiversity around us. So, and we're always learning about that. Like Massachusetts first put vernal pool levels of protection in place, and they protected just the pool and found that, a year or two later, there was no amphibian populations. And they're like, well, we protected the pool. Like, what's the big deal? And the big deal, as you know, was that they didn't protect the upland forest. And so they had a place to breed, but no place to live or spend the winter protected. So we've been able to learn from those mistakes, thankfully, and figure out how to protect more of the pool around it. But first, we need to assess those pools. So somebody trained in wetland or wildlife ecology, or if you can demonstrate your competence to the IFNW or DEP, you can become a certified pool assessor. And then you would go in this time of year and go check out and count all the egg masses. There's a 3-page assessment that you fill out and send to the state. This is voluntary, so the landowner has to agree to it. So you can't just go, I can't go up back to that pool that I found fairy shrimp in and go assess it and send it to the state. And then they go tell the landowner and it's like kind of null and void. So yeah, I would need to ask first, which of course I would, right? So what we're looking for is the fairy shrimp, and they can be present in any life stage. So if there's fairy shrimp anywhere in the pool, all of a sudden that's significant. That's a big deal. If we find 10 or more egg masses of the blue spotted salamander or hybrids, that is criteria for significance. If we find 20 or more egg masses of spotted salamanders, or 40 or more egg masses of the wood frog, and if there's that many wood frogs, there's probably salamander egg masses as well. Sorry that this is blurry. I put a link to it at the end in the resources. But this is a great chart I love to look at with the different timings for the egg masses. So remember I said that the wood frogs earlier, by the time the salamander egg masses are there, the wood frogs are kind of already falling apart, like that picture in the frisbee. So you would need to go to the same pool twice. Wood frogs, typically 1 to 2 weeks after you first hear a full chorus, you can go assess the wood frog masses. And if fairy shrimp are there, you'll probably see them at that time. And then you would go look for and count the salamander egg masses 2 to 3 weeks later. And then by mid-May, it's kind of like season's wrapped up. You're starting to think about and plan next year and dreaming about new waders. And of course, this is going to vary for the region, the weather, the elevation, and the geography. But it's a good, I like looking at this and going, okay, this is when I need to plan assessments. So if we find that a pool is significant, these are the protections for the pools. And again, this is landowner voluntary for the pool to be assessed. So once we're like, okay, this is significant, then as far as development, there can be no disturbance within the depression, within the pool depression. You have to maintain 75% of critical terrestrial habitat, which is amazing, I think. So it has to be unfragmented forest with partly closed canopy to provide shade, and the deep litter and woody debris that we talked about. You maintain or restore forest corridors connecting the wetlands and significant vernal pools to make sure that that upland habitat connects to the wetlands. Minimize forest floor disturbance and maintain native understory vegetation and downed woody debris. Sorry about my dog again. So these are the protections in place for significant pools. And again, if it is not found significant, it doesn't have these protections. Oh. Sorry. Okay, so us as individuals, what can we do? If we have any pools on our property, we can contact the nearest DEP office or a site visit to determine the significance. We're going to leave eggs undisturbed even as the pool is drying up, and this is super hard, right? So this is part of they're designed for this, right? This happens. So the population will continue on even if a single pool dries up. And I like to think about, or at least makes me feel better, that is food for something else, no matter what. So as a landowner, if you're planning development or if you're harvesting near a significant pool, you need to check with DEP for a permitting process. And this is important too. I think sometimes as landowners, we want things to be clean and tidy, and near the pool, a messy forest floor is super important to those amphibian inhabitants. So the healthy forest canopy and then the messy forest floor are both really important. And like I said earlier, balancing conservation with thoughtful development with habitat connectivity in mind is very important. And then there's an incredible wealth of resources out there. I mean, the internet is just crazy. So explore the resources that are out there. There's videos. There's an amazing main website called, I think it's vernalpools.me. I put the link in the end, so don't worry. But you can also Google of pools and people, and it will bring you to that. But Aram Calhoun, she's a professor at UMaine in Orono. She's a wetland ecologist and fantastic. But there's a ton of identification videos and fact sheets and all sorts of stuff. So explore the resources that are out there, and then get out to local pools and start looking around because it's really exciting. And then whenever you can, share that magic with kiddos anytime. There are citizen science assessment trainings out there, so you can become certified and then you can start checking out local pools. And remember to get that landowner permission first. And then here's,
Alana, sorry,
yeah.
are you towards the end?
This is the last slide. Yep.
Excellent. Okay. There's a question in the chat, but we can wait until
Okay. Oh,
you're done.
there's a couple. Yeah, Bruce. So the wood frog masses, this this is why I say go check out that Of Pools and People website. And that's the top one here. So vernalpools.me, and she has amazing, there's a video just on how to count egg masses, and she'll pick them up out of the pool and show you this is 1 mass, this is 2 mass, this is 3 mass. And like you're saying, that blob, that huge mat that I showed at the beginning, it is a little daunting to think about counting all those eggs or the egg masses. But yeah, you got to get in the pool and you lift it up and you check it out. This is 1, this is 2, this is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1,400. Hopefully there are that many. Yeah, check out that first, vernalpools.me. And like I said, you can also, the website's called Of Pools and People. So when I can't remember the website of vernalpools.me, I type in Of Pools and People and it comes up. And then this coloring book picture on the right-hand side by Christine Hoffman. She was a PhD student under Aram Calhoun up at UMaine, and she came to speak a few years ago. She was hilarious. She does radio telemetry on these amphibians, and she talks about you have to go out on the super wet, cold, rainy nights to follow them, right? And the the radio collar for these guys is like this big, and so you have to be within like 10 feet of them to follow them. And she would sit there in the rain and think about all those people studying bears and moose and how they can sit in their dorm room and watch where the moose is going. And she was out there like rescuing wood frogs out of like culverts and stuff, storm drains. Anyway, she was a riot. She also compared them to being, she said they were walking hamburgers out into the upland forest. So that was pretty funny. Anyway, this is a coloring book. So you can print it right off the website if you have any kiddos in your life. And that that first link there brings you to that. And that website is just vast. There's an incredible amount of resources. This other vernalpool.org is like, I think it's Massachusetts, and amazing, just incredible. Naturally Curious with Mary Holland. If you do not follow Mary Holland, please do it. She's amazing. And just that's like general naturalist information. She sends you an email. It's a paragraph long with this incredible picture. I just subscribe to her email and it's awesome. She always talks about if I have a question out in the woods, I'm like, oh, I wonder what this is. This happened, Mary and I found a mushroom and we didn't know what it was. And then literally that day or the next day, Mary Holland posted it. I was like, she's amazing. Okay, Audubon has a great PDF for homeowners, background of vernal pools and what you can do. And then that final link is the one to the blurry picture with the vernal pool timing that I showed you, or the egg mass timing. But if anyone else has any other questions, I'd be glad to take them. And again, feel free to unmute and ask or type in the chat.
Elena,
Yeah, Irene.
a couple slides ago, you had different species, and one was the wood frog with what looked like right there.
Yep.
Is
yep.
that a radio collar?
Yeah, so it goes around their waist. You can see how tiny it is. Is that crazy or what? I forgot about that. Irene. Thank you.
So what's that little rope or line at the end? Does that get cut off, or?
Yeah, so that's the antenna. And I was looking at this, Irene, earlier going, well, that doesn't look very helpful for breeding, right? So the idea is they set up this silt fence around the vernal pool and these drop buckets, basically. And the animals, salamanders or wood frogs, will get to the silt fence and be like, oh, this is impenetrable wall, and go along the silt fence and into the drop bucket. So they're caught. So these animals have already bred for the season, and this is a way to see where they're going into the upland forest. And then they will catch them and remove their collars or their radio things when they return to the pool in the spring so that they can breed more
So it
easily.
follows them kind of like a GPS, or
Yeah,
see
so
them?
she has like a tracking device that she has to be within like 20 feet of it, like me, you know, and can follow it. But this is how they determined that these animals are moving between 400 and 800 feet or up to 3/4 of a mile. And she was looking specifically at if there was development in an area, what is there a better place or not? And they found that a lot of amphibians actually trend, I believe it's northwest. And so they were like, well, if we can keep this corridor open to the northwest, then maybe that's okay. She did find one, leave a pool and go northwest and get caught in a storm drain. She called the town, got down in there and rescued it. So pretty funny. I mean, like there's a level that I'm at, and then that's like a whole nother level of super cool, which I want to be friends with her, right? Clearly. Yeah, so they're doing all sorts of studies on distance, where they're going, how far they're going, when they're returning, everything. And these guys, I didn't mention, I think we talked about it earlier in Mary's presentation for Big Night and then in my presentation about turtles, but amphibians are really susceptible to the changes that are going on globally right now. So they're kind of like canary in the coal mine for us. Like if we can figure out what's going on, or if we notice that something's happening with our amphibian populations, that's a like big indicator for us that something big is about to happen to all of us. So remember that they respirate through their skin and absorb things through their skin. And so any air pollution or anything, or, you know, obviously if we are not having as much precipitation in the winter and spring, and then hotter and drier summers, that's a big deficit for the vernal pool species.
So Alana, there's a question. Did we record your turtle talk?
No, Catherine, I'm so sorry. That was like at the beginning of us. I know where. So Catherine, I think that so that was sort of reporting out on the turtle assessments that we did last year, turtle assessments. I said that weird. At Holt Pond, and we're working with Greater Level Land Trust to do assessments at Charles Pond Preserve, which is a new preserve they just closed on at the end of last year. So we'll be checking out what sort of species are there, and then Lee and I have talked about doing another turtle presentation in the fall. So I will certainly be sharing that with you know, our folks and the Greater Level folks, and then I bet it'll be a webinar as well. So, and maybe we'll remember to record that one. But thank you, Bruce. That's so nice.
That's nice. So I have a confession. I moved some salamander eggs out of a rut 2 days ago.
Always. And
I
I
put
like
them into a pool.
Right.
It was just
So,
like a tractor was back there, made this rut, and it was filled with disgusting algae, like filaments of algae just everywhere. Salamanders swimming in this algae. I got a video. It was gross. And they laid their eggs, and I just couldn't do it. And then the salamanders leave, you know, they lay the eggs and they're like, peace out.
Peace.
Good luck.
Yeah.
I laid you in a rut.
Right. So I like, you know, how there's natural selection. And if that salamander was like, oh, this rut is freaking awesome, and lay their eggs, then maybe that salamander shouldn't keep reproducing.
That's true. I suppose that's true.
Maybe that's not fair to like
The
compare
progeny.
salamanders to us, but
yeah. Well,
yeah.
and the babies, you know, like they didn't do anything to deserve that. Drying out.
All right, I'm going to stop recording where we can keep chatting.
Oh,
And I
man.
just want
Yeah,
to
I
say
forgot that
thank
we
you for coming this evening. And please reach out to us with any questions, or if you want me to send links of everything on that last slide, I can certainly do that as well.
And
Thank you
maybe go
very
out
much.
tonight.
Oh.
It's raining.